The sun on Zharak wasn't just hot, it was the kind of blistering that made you question your life choices, including why you ever thought relic hunting on a dead-end desert planet was a glamorous career move. Tamsin Kaur squinted against the heat haze rising off the rocky terrain, wiping a trickle of sweat off her brow with an old rag that had seen better days. Her crew, a motley collection of misfits and other poor decision-makers, stared at her expectantly, like dogs waiting for dinner. "Well, folks, this hole in the ground might just be the most exciting thing we've seen this week," Tamsin declared with a grin that was more grimace than anything else. Her second-in-command, a wiry man by the name of Jex, scratched at the stubble on his chin with a dirty fingernail. Not that it's a high bar, considering the most exciting thing yesterday was watching Tarek's lunch come back out the wrong way. Tarek, the crew's designated grump, gave Jex the finger while taking a swig from his canteen. You try eating anything after the rations have been sunbaked into something resembling rubber. Tamsin turned her attention back to the hole in the ground. It was more than just a hole, really, it was an ancient control chamber buried beneath the sands, or so they hoped. The entrance was a jagged maw of metal and rock, promising either treasure or death. Maybe both. All right. Let's see if this thing has anything worth the sweat, Tamsin said, gesturing for the crew to follow her into the abyss. Inside, the temperature dropped from hellish to merely unbearable. The walls were lined with panels that might have been high-tech in a different millennium. Now they mostly looked like the control room of a long-abandoned theme park. "I swear, if I see a sign for Space Mountain, I'm out," muttered Harlan, the group's self-proclaimed tech guru. Tamsin chuckled. "Relax, Harlan. If there's a roller coaster, I'm sure it's as dead as the rest of this place." They fumbled around in the dim light, their flashlights casting nervous beams across the dusty surfaces. Wires hung like forgotten vines, and every step kicked up clouds of dirt that settled in their lungs like an unwanted tenant. "Hey, look at this," called Jex from one corner. He was crouched by a panel that seemed more intact than the others. The team gathered around, peering at what looked like a control interface, covered in alien symbols. Well, mostly alien symbols. One or two looked suspiciously like they'd been borrowed from Tamsin's old Earth geology textbooks. "Great, now we just need the Rosetta Stone," Tamsin said, crossing her arms. "Any chance one of you picked up ancient alien hieroglyphics as a hobby?" Harlan kneeled down, pulling out a device that was mostly duct tape in desperation. "Let's see what we can do. Worst case scenario, we blow up in a spectacular display of incompetence." "Wouldn't that just cap off a perfect day?" Tarek added dryly. As Harlan tinkered, Tamsin wandered the chamber, her mind wandering to Earth. It was always Earth, the place they all wanted to get back to, or at least make enough credits to retire on some beach with drinks that came with umbrellas. Instead, they were trying to decipher alien tech in a place where the biggest excitement was a sandstorm. "I think I've got something," Harlan announced, breaking Tamsin's reverie. The control panel flickered to life with a hum, the symbols lighting up as if excited to finally have company. "Well, look at that," Jex said, mockingly impressed. "You actually did it." "No faith, Jex. That's your problem," Harlan shot back. "Now let's see what this puppy does." Tamsin leaned over his shoulder. "Be gentle, we don't want to accidentally set off a planetary self-destruct sequence." "Oh, come on, what's the worst that could happen?" Harlan mumbled as his fingers danced over the buttons. The machine responded with a series of beeps and whirs that, to Tamsin's ear, sounded suspiciously like it was laughing at them. Then suddenly, the ground trembled beneath their feet, sending a cascade of dust from the ceiling. "I think you asked the wrong question," Jex noted grimly, bracing himself against the wall. The tremors stopped as abruptly as they began, leaving the team in a tense silence, listening to the sound of their own breaths. "Okay, so maybe I poked the wrong button," Harlan admitted. Tamsin turned to him with a raised eyebrow. "You don't say." Back outside, the sky was starting to change, clouds swirling in a way that had never been witnessed on Zharak. It was as if the planet was waking up from a long slumber, stretching its limbs, ready to wreak havoc. Boss," Tarek called from where he was standing guard at the entrance. "You might want to see this." Tamsin joined him, staring up at the swirling sky. "Son of a bitch," she muttered. "So what now?" Jex asked, joining her. Tamsin let out a long sigh. "I think we just kickstarted something we can't stop. And if it's affecting this rock, who knows what it's doing to Earth." Guess we've got to find out, Harlan said, already packing up his gear. Find out, Tamsin echoed, a wry smile pulling at her lips. Or die trying, right? Harlan shrugged. You'd miss us if we died. Don't count on it, Tarek grumbled, though there was a hint of reluctant camaraderie in his voice. They gathered their things, preparing to head back to their ship. The relic hunt had turned into something far bigger than they'd bargained for. But then, if they'd wanted safe and predictable, they'd be flipping burgers on Earth, not risking their necks on a desert planet. As they trudged back across the sand, the distant horizon flickered with the promise of a storm, threatening to swallow Zharak whole. Whatever sequence they'd initiated, it was playing out in real time, and time was a luxury they didn't have. Hey, Tamsin, Jex called, falling into step beside her. Yeah, next time we're picking a location for a job, remind me to choose one with a spa. Tamsin laughed, the sound dry as the desert air. You got it, Jex. And maybe we'll find one that doesn't try to kill us. They continued their march towards the ship, shadows stretching long in the fading light, each step a reminder that they were in too deep. But for Tamsin and her crew, there wasn't really any turning back. They were relic hunters, after all. Trouble was part of the package, and they wouldn't have it any other way. As they reached the ship and prepared for takeoff, Tamsin glanced back one last time at the ancient chamber, now hidden beneath the swirling sands. Whatever was happening, they'd started it, and like it or not, they were going to have to finish it. The engines roared to life, and as they lifted off, Tamsin couldn't shake the feeling that they were leaving more than just dust behind. As Zharak dwindled to a speck in the distance, the sky still churned with the chaos they'd unleashed, a portent of the storm heading for Earth. Buckle up, Tamsin called to her crew, voice steady as the ship soared into the void. Looks like we're heading back to the old stomping grounds. Home sweet home, Jex muttered, strapping in beside her. Hope it's still there when we arrive. Tamsin nodded, eyes fixed on the stars ahead. Me too, Jex, me too. The ship rattled like a rusty tin can as it ascended into the void, its metal guts clanging in protest. Tamsin Kaur sat in the pilot's seat, her eyes glued to the swirling chaos on Zharak below. The storm they'd inadvertently unleashed was still going at it, whipping the sand into a frenzy that could only be described as a tantrum of biblical proportions. Think that's gonna follow us home? Jex asked, his tone suggesting he might be only half joking. Not if I can help it, Tamsin replied, punching a few buttons with more hope than certainty. I'd rather not bring a sandstorm to Earth. Lord knows we've got enough problems. The rest of the crew were scattered throughout the ship, trying to pretend they weren't all thinking the same thing. What the hell had they done? Tarek slumped in a seat, arms crossed, looking every bit the disgruntled bear someone had dressed in human clothing. I'm sure Earth will give us a warm welcome, he grumbled. If it's not already on fire. Harlan was fussing over his contraptions, wires and screens flickering with data. Who knew poking an ancient control panel could end so well? Could have been worse, Tamsin said with a shrug. We could have been blown to bits down there. Optimism. Thy name is Tamsin, Jex muttered, leaning back in his chair, staring at the ship's ceiling like it held the answers to life's great mysteries. The hum of the engines and the occasional creak of the ship's frame were the only sounds as they sailed towards Earth. Each crew member was lost in their own thoughts, fears lurking at the edges of their minds. Then Harlan spoke up, breaking the tense silence. I think I've figured out what that control room was for. Oh, this should be good, Tarek drawled, not bothering to lift his head. See, these symbols, Harlan said, pointing to a screen displaying a series of alien hieroglyphs. They're part of an ancient terraforming network. It's like someone built a planetary remote control and we hit the on switch. Great, we're accidentally planet engineers, Jex said dryly. I always wanted a career change. Tamsin sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. So what does that mean for Earth? Harlan looked up from his screen, his expression uncharacteristically serious. If the network's connected, it might be trying to terraform Earth. Change the atmosphere, the climate, everything. Tamsin stared at him, trying to process the enormity of what he was saying. So we're talking apocalyptic weather, right? Floods, storms, maybe a plague of locusts for good measure? Something like that, Harlan said, not sugarcoating it. And we've got to stop it. Of course we do, Tarek mumbled. Because that's what we do. We stop ancient alien technology from wrecking our home planet. Just another Tuesday. As they barreled through space, the crew went about prepping the ship for what would no doubt be a less than warm reception on Earth. Harlan worked frantically, trying to decipher a way to reverse what they'd started. Tarek grudgingly helped, though his main contribution seemed to be grumbling about the lack of decent coffee. Tamsin watched them work, her mind racing with possibilities. They'd stumbled into something huge, something that could change everything, and the weight of it sat heavy on her shoulders. But if there was one thing she'd learned, it was that worrying never helped anyone. "So, do we have a plan?" Jex asked, dragging a chair over to join Tamsin at the controls. Tamsin gave him a sideways glance. "Since when do we ever have a plan?" "Fair point," Jex said, scratching at his stubbly chin. "But maybe this time we should come up with one before we get there." "Yeah, maybe," Tamsin admitted, staring out at the stars. "But first, let's see if Earth even wants us back." As if on cue, the ship's comm system crackled to life, a voice coming through with all the warmth of a bureaucrat who'd missed their coffee break. "Unidentified vessel, this is Earth Control. You are approaching restricted space. State your business." Tamsin leaned forward, pressing the comm button with a finger. "This is Tamsin Core of the Zharak Explorer. We're returning from a relic hunting mission with some urgent information." There was a pause, as if the voice on the other end was weighing up whether to believe her. "Relic hunting, huh? You guys have a knack for timing. Any chance you're behind the weird weather?" Tamsin winced, glancing at her crew. "Yeah, about that. We might have accidentally turned on an ancient terraforming network. We're trying to fix it." Another pause, longer this time. "Well, you'd better get your asses down here and help sort this mess out. Earth doesn't have time for any more surprises." "Roger that," Tamsin replied, switching off the comm. She turned to Jex, a wry smile on her lips. "See? They want us back." "Yeah, like a hemorrhoid," Jex snorted. As they descended towards Earth, it became clear the planet had seen better days. The clouds were thicker, churning with a menace that promised things were about to get biblical. It felt like Mother Nature had finally snapped, and they were the unlucky sods caught in the fallout. Landing wasn't exactly smooth. The ship touched down like a drunken elephant, skidding slightly before coming to a shuddering halt. The crew disembarked, squinting at the sky as they stepped into the chaos they'd helped unleash. "Well, it's good to be home," Tarek said, breathing in the muggy air with a look of disgust. "Smells like wet dog." "That's probably just you," Jex quipped, earning him a half-hearted glare. They didn't have time to enjoy the homecoming. There was work to be done. Harlan led the way, clutching his makeshift device like a talisman. Their goal was simple: find a way to reverse the terraforming network before Earth became a very unpleasant place to live. As they made their way through the chaos, the streets were empty, people having taken cover or fled. It was eerie, a ghost town in the making, and Tamsin couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against the clock. "Anyone else feel like we're the last people on Earth?" Jex asked, his voice echoing in the deserted streets. "Let's hope not," Tamsin replied, keeping her pace brisk. "Otherwise, saving it is going to be a real waste of time." They reached the control center, a bunker-like facility that looked like it had seen a few too many action movies. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, the air buzzing with the kind of electricity that made your hair stand on end. Officials and scientists bustled around, their faces a mix of panic and determination. Tamsin strode forward, trying to project an air of authority she didn't quite feel. A harried-looking official approached them, clipboard in hand. "You the relic hunters?" he asked, his tone suggesting he was struggling to believe such a thing existed. "That's us," Tamsin said, "and we think we can stop this." The official looked skeptical. "You'd better hope so. Otherwise, we're all going to need a hell of a lot of umbrellas." "No pressure then," Harlan muttered, setting up his equipment. The crew got to work, poring over data and hieroglyphs, their makeshift setup looking like a cross between a science fair project and a mad scientist's lab. Harlan barked instructions, the others following without question, because at this point, what did they have to lose? As they worked, the weather outside continued its descent into madness. Rain lashed down in sheets, turning streets into rivers, and the wind howled like a banshee with a grudge. Tarek, ever the pessimist, looked up from the screen he was staring at. "If this doesn't work, we're going to need a really good excuse. How about, oops, sorry, we didn't mean to end civilization as we know it." Jex suggested, not looking up from his task. Tamsin shook her head, a small smile on her lips despite the circumstances. Let's just fix this before we have to give any apologies. Hours passed in a blur of frantic activity, the atmosphere tense enough to crack teeth. But slowly, piece by piece, they started to make progress. Harlan sat back, wiping sweat from his brow. I think I've got it. If I'm right, this should disengage the network and stop the terraforming sequence. And if you're wrong? Tarek asked, not quite managing to keep the edge out of his voice. We all get front row seats to the apocalypse, Harlan replied, his expression grim. Tamsin nodded, stepping back to give him room. Do it. Harlan took a deep breath, fingers poised over the controls. The rest of the crew held their breath, tension thicker than the storm clouds outside. With a final, decisive click, Harlan activated the sequence, the room holding its collective breath as the machines whirred to life. For a moment, nothing happened, the air heavy with anticipation. Then, slowly, the tempest outside began to ease, the winds dying down, the rain tapering off. It was as if the planet had decided to take a breather, the storm pulling back from the brink of destruction. It's working, Tamsin said, voice barely above a whisper. The crew let out a collective sigh of relief, tension bleeding away as the reality of what they'd accomplished sank in. They'd done it, at least for now. As they packed up their gear, the official approached them again, a grudging respect in his eyes. I owe you an apology. You really saved our asses. Tamsin shrugged, a wry smile tugging at her lips. Just another day at the office. With Earth no longer in imminent danger of becoming an alien theme park, the crew took a moment to savor their victory. The storm clouds finally breaking apart to reveal a sky that was, for once, blessedly calm. As they made their way back to their ship, Jex nudged Tamsin. Think we'll get a hero's welcome? Tamsin chuckled, shaking her head. Knowing our luck, more likely a bill for damages. Wouldn't have it any other way, Jex said with a grin, the crew falling into step behind them, ready to face whatever chaos the universe threw their way next. Because for Tamsin and her crew, trouble wasn't just part of the job, it was an occupational hazard they wouldn't trade for anything. You'd think after saving the world, they'd at least offer us a cup of coffee, Tarek grumbled, kicking at a stray rock as they left the control center behind. He was met with the stale, humid air of Earth, which actually did smell something akin to wet dog. Maybe Jex wasn't entirely wrong about that. Coffee? Please. We'll be lucky if they don't bill us for making it rain cats and dogs, Jex replied, adjusting the strap of his bag. And by cats and dogs, I mean the furry apocalypse we nearly triggered. Harlan grunted, fiddling with a small device that looked suspiciously like something held together by duct tape and a prayer. Let's just hope whatever we did sticks. Last thing I need is a permanent career in climate control. Tamsin, ever the captain, led the way with a determined stride, as though the chaos they'd just averted was no more than a mild inconvenience. Like getting gum on your shoe rather than saving a planet from self-imposed annihilation. Come on, you lot. We did what we came to do. Now let's get back to the ship before they change their minds and decide we're public enemy number one. One? Ha, Tarek snorted. I'm pretty sure we ranked somewhere between nuclear warhead and global pandemic on their list. The streets of Earth looked like the morning after a particularly wild party. Debris littered the ground, signs swung precariously in the wind, and the odd storefront window was boarded up, a testament to the overzealous preparations made when the skies had first started acting up. You know, Jex mused as they passed a half-crumpled advertisement for synthetic coffee beans. I never really pictured myself as the kind of guy who'd save the world. More like the guy who sat back and watched it burn, popcorn in hand. Well, congrats, Tamsin shot back, not breaking her stride. You're officially a hero now. Might even get your face on a cereal box. They navigated the sodden streets, careful of the impromptu rivers cutting through the asphalt like a drunk driver's idea of a straight line. The sky was finally clearing, revealing patches of blue that seemed to mock them with their cheerful brightness. Great, Tarek muttered, squinting up at the sun like it owed him money. Just when I was getting used to the idea of living in a dystopian novel. Between balancing the precarious state of Earth's weather systems and the looming threat of a potential interstellar lawsuit, Tamsin's head was spinning like one of those cheap fairground rides that always left you feeling queasy. Back at the ship, they found it where they'd left it, hunkered down like a sulking dog, engines cooling, the hum of its systems a familiar, oddly comforting sound. The gangplank lowered with a groan of hydraulics that had seen better days, welcoming them back to their metal cocoon. "Home sweet rust bucket," Jex said, patting the hull affectionately as they boarded. "If we're lucky, it'll still be flying come morning," Tarek added, ever the optimist. Once inside, Harlan immediately set to work checking their systems, muttering to himself in the way of someone who'd spent too much time alone with machines. "We've got our work cut out for us. The storm might be over, but the network could still be in flux. We'll need to make sure it's completely disabled before we take off again." "Sure, why not?" Tamsin sighed, dropping into the pilot's seat like it was an old, uncomfortable friend. "I'll just add, fix alien doomsday device, to today's to-do list right under, don't get blown up." While the ship's diagnostic systems chugged along, filling the cabin with a symphony of beeps and whirs, the crew settled into their usual spots, pretending they weren't all secretly wishing for the sweet escape of sleep. "You know," Jex said, stretching his arms over his head and nearly hitting the low ceiling, "if we do manage to get off this rock without being arrested or blown to bits, I say we take a vacation." "A vacation?" Tarek scoffed, settling into his seat with all the grace of a sack of potatoes. "The last time we tried that, we ended up in a ziggurat full of killer drones." "Ah, memories," Jex replied with a mock wistfulness that only made Tarek scowl more. "Enough chit-chat," Tamsin interjected, cutting through their bickering like a knife through particularly annoying butter. "Let's focus. The sooner we make sure we didn't just hit the snooze button on Earth's destruction, the sooner we can get the hell out of here." With renewed urgency, Harlan dove back into his data, eyes scanning rows of hieroglyphs and alien algorithms that made Earth's most complex equations look like kiddie math. He was in his element, and for all his grumbling, there was no one else they'd trust with the job. "So, what's the verdict, genius?" Jex asked, leaning over Harlan's shoulder with the subtlety of a brick. "Hard to say," Harlan replied, not looking up. "It's like trying to decipher a recipe with half the ingredients in Martian." "Well, let's hope it's not how to bake a disaster pie," Tarek chimed in, rubbing his temples. "Because I'm not in the mood for dessert." As the hours ticked by, Tamsin and her crew worked in a tense, focused silence, the kind that was only interrupted by the occasional sarcastic quip or frustrated groan. Outside, the storm had completely subsided, replaced by a tentative calm that made the morning's chaos feel like a fever dream. Eventually, Harlan pushed back from the console with a triumphant grin. "I think I've got it. The network's offline, properly this time. No more terraforming shenanigans unless someone's dumb enough to flip the switch again." "Good," Tamsin said, relief washing over her like a long overdue shower. "Let's get out of here before someone decides to make us the face of the next natural disaster." With the engines humming to life, the ship shuddered slightly, lifting off with a grace that belied its patchwork exterior. Tamsin guided them upwards, breaking through Earth's atmosphere and back into the cold embrace of space. "Here's to not being public enemy number one anymore," Jex said, raising an imaginary glass as the stars swallowed them whole. "Don't jinx it," Tarek replied, but there was a smile tugging at his lips all the same. The ship settled into a steady course, the familiar routines of space travel resuming like an old habit. For now, at least, they could breathe easy, though in this line of work, easy was often as fleeting as a comet tail. "So, what's next?" Jex asked, slumping into his seat with the air of someone who'd just run a marathon and was ready for a nap. "Next?" Tamsin echoed, staring out at the vast nothingness that was their playground, their battlefield, their home. "We find the next crisis to stumble into. After all, we wouldn't want to get bored." "Speak for yourself," Tarek said, closing his eyes and settling in for what he hoped would be an uneventful journey. "I could use a little boredom." As Tamsin piloted them through the stars, the weight of their recent adventure began to lift, leaving behind a peculiar mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. They'd done it. They'd saved the world, even if the world didn't quite know it yet. "Hey, Tamsin," Jex said, breaking the silence. "Do you think they'll remember us? You know, back on Earth?" Tamsin chuckled, eyes fixed on the stars. "Oh, I'm sure they will. If only to remind us they're still sending the bill." With a wry smile, she relaxed into her seat, letting the hum of the engines lull her into a rare moment of peace. Because in the vast, unpredictable chaos of the universe, she had her crew, her ship, and the knowledge that, for once, things had gone right. And in the grand scheme of things, that was more than enough. The ship rattled through the void like a tin can in a cosmic washing machine, but that was nothing new. If you've ever been inside an ancient spacecraft held together by little more than wishful thinking and alien duct tape, you'd know it wasn't exactly a luxury cruise. But it was home, more or less. Tamsin Kaur leaned back in her seat, hands steady on the controls. The familiar hum of the engines was almost soothing, a reminder that things could be worse. They could always be worse. So, what's on the agenda? Jex asked, kicking his feet up on the console like he owned the place. And in a way, he did. They all did. Until the ship decided to disintegrate mid-journey, which was always a possibility. Well, Tamsin said, aside from not getting blown up, I'm hoping we can figure out how to stop Earth's climate from going all end of days on us. Easy, Jex replied, with the kind of optimism that made you want to punch him. We just need to find the secret shutdown sequence hidden in a mythical ancient guide. No big deal. Right, Tarek said from the back, where he was rummaging through their increasingly pathetic supply of rations. And maybe while we're at it, we can find the Holy Grail and a unicorn. Assuming they're not on backorder. Harlan ignored their banter, eyes glued to the screen as he continued to decipher the alien script that danced across it. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, folks, but our chances aren't looking great. The planet's ecosystem is on the fritz, and we're down to half a pack of stale crackers and something that might have been beef jerky once. Fantastic, Tamsin muttered. Apocalypse on a budget. The ship's cramped interior was starting to feel like a pressure cooker, and not just because the air recycling system was about as reliable as a politician's promise. Stale air mingled with the scent of desperation, not the best cocktail recipe, but it would have to do. The crew's limited resources were becoming a hot topic of grumbling. Rations were running low, tempers were running high, and the existential dread of impending doom was the cherry on top of the sundae. All right, Tamsin said, clapping her hands to get everyone's attention. Let's focus. We need to figure out where this shutdown sequence is. Harlan, any luck with that? Harlan rubbed his eyes, which were starting to resemble two pissholes in the snow. I found something that looks like a map, but it's more like a treasure hunt for the damned. It's in some lost city buried under sand. Because apparently, nothing can ever just be easy. Great, Jex said, sarcasm dripping from his words. We go from saving the world to auditioning for the next Indiana Jones movie. What's next? Snake pits. If we're lucky, Tarek said dryly. I bet they'd make a nice change from the usual near-death experiences. Maybe we can charge admission. Their banter was a thin veneer over the very real tension that crackled in the air. They were running out of time, out of food, and quite possibly out of luck. Tamsin stood up, determination etched on her face like a woman facing down a particularly stubborn stain. Listen, we've dealt with worse. We'll find this place, shut down the network, and get Earth back in order. As long as we stick together, we've got a fighting chance. Her words were met with varying degrees of skepticism, hope, and the odd snort of derision. But in the end, they were a team. A dysfunctional, sarcastic, and slightly unhinged team, but a team nonetheless. So, Jex said, stretching his arms before he went back to fiddling with his bag. Where are we headed, Captain? To the once great city of Xandros, Harlan answered, voice laced with irony. Or what's left of it under a few thousand tons of sand in despair. And people say I'm not a fun traveler, Jex quipped, earning a laugh from Tarek. All right, let's get moving, Tamsin ordered, taking her seat again. We've got an ancient guide to find and a world to save. Again, the ship shuddered as it adjusted course, engines groaning like an old man getting up from a particularly uncomfortable chair. As they soared through the vast emptiness, the stars around them little more than indifferent spectators, the crew settled into their roles, each one grappling with the weight of what lay ahead. The silence stretched on for a while, punctuated only by the background hum of the ship and the occasional clatter from Tarek's explorations of their supplies. Eventually, Jex spoke up, his voice cutting through the quiet like a rusty knife. You ever think about what we'll do if this all goes belly up? Tamsin glanced over, raising an eyebrow. You mean more belly up than it already is? Yeah, Jex replied, unperturbed. Like, say we can't find the shutdown sequence, Earth turns into a giant sand castle, and we're left wandering the cosmos with nothing but good intentions and bad jokes. Sounds like a typical Tuesday, Tarek chimed in, shrugging. Look, Tamsin said, her gaze fixed on the stars ahead. We've made it this far. We'll figure it out. We always do. And if we don't? Harlan asked, eyes shadowed with genuine concern. Then at least we'll have front row seats to the universe's biggest train wreck, Jex said with a grin that was equal parts bravado and fatalism. Cheers to that, Tarek murmured, raising an imaginary glass. The ship sailed on, cutting through the darkness like a knife through old, sticky butter. They had a destination, a plan, albeit a vague, half-formed one, and the kind of camaraderie that only came from shared adversity and a mutual appreciation for gallows humor. As they approached their destination, the remnants of Xandros loomed on the horizon like the broken bones of a long-dead colossus. Sand dunes stretched for miles, their shapes shifting under the relentless solar wind, while the ruins themselves jutted out like jagged teeth. Well, Harlan said, staring at the desolate landscape. There it is, the mythical city of Xandros. Looks more like a sandpit with delusions of grandeur, Jex observed, squinting against the glare. Delusions or not, that's where we're headed, Tamsin replied, guiding the ship towards a relatively stable landing spot. And if there's even a chance that the guide we need is buried there, we'll dig it up. You heard the lady, Tarek said, cracking his knuckles. Time to play archaeologist. The ship touched down with a groan of metal and a cloud of dust that rose up like a curtain, blocking out the harsh sun. As the gangplank lowered, the crew geared up, their banter a constant undercurrent as they prepared for their latest excursion into the unknown. All right, team, Tamsin said, her voice carrying over the wind. We're looking for anything that resembles an ancient guide. And by guide, I mean anything that looks like it might hold the secrets to not destroying Earth. Because vague clues in a desolate wasteland are always a good time, Jex said, adjusting his gear. Well, at least the accommodations are consistent with the rest of our trip, Tarek added, stepping off the ship and onto the sand. Remember, Harlan said, his tone serious. We don't have much time. The longer Earth's systems stay unstable, the harder it'll be to fix them. We find that guide, or we're toast. Toast, Jex echoed. Why is it always food analogies? Because we're starving, you idiot, Tarek shot back, not unkindly. The team spread out, each one scouring different sections of the ruins. The sun beat down on them like a hammer, relentless and uncaring, as they sifted through debris and ancient stone. It was tedious, exhausting work, and the kind that left them all a little more than frustrated. But Tamsin kept them moving, driven by determination and a stubborn refusal to let the universe have the last laugh. Hey, Jex called out after what felt like hours. I think I found something. The others converged on his position, staring down at what appeared to be a stone tablet half buried in the sand. Strange symbols covered its surface, their meaning lost to time but promising salvation or disaster. Is it the guide? Tarek asked, eyeing it with a blend of hope and skepticism. Harlan knelt down, brushing away the sand as he examined the tablet. It's definitely something old, could be what we're looking for. Or it could be the intergalactic equivalent of a grocery list, Jex quipped, earning a half-hearted laugh from the crew. Whatever it is, Tamsin said, voice laced with determination, it's our best shot. Let's get it back to the ship and figure this out. With the tablet carefully packed and secured, they made their way back to the ship, the weight of their discovery heavy on their shoulders. Once inside, Harlan set to work, analyzing the symbols and comparing them to the data they'd already gathered. It was a painstaking process, but one he attacked with a fervor born of desperation and genius in equal measure. The rest of the crew watched, nerves stretched taut as violin strings, each one acutely aware of the stakes. The air crackled with tension, the kind that only comes when you're standing on the precipice of potential annihilation. Finally, Harlan looked up, eyes bright with a mix of triumph and disbelief. I think this is it, he said. The guide speaks of a sequence, a shutdown sequence. It's buried in the heart of Xandros, but it's there. Then we've got a shot, Tamsin said, relief washing over her. We just need to find it, activate it, and hope it's not the universe's worst practical joke. A shot in the dark, Tarek said, but there was a glimmer of hope in his words. Wouldn't be the first time, Jex added, grinning despite himself. As they prepared to delve deeper into the ruins, Tamsin felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were closer than ever, and for the first time in what felt like ages, they had a direction. A chance to set things right. And as long as they had that, they'd keep fighting, one step at a time. The ship groaned louder than a pensioner with a bad back as the sands of Zharak howled around it. Inside, Tamsin leaned against the console, the weight of the universe pressing heavier than the hangover of an interstellar keg party. The storm outside wasn't just weather, it was a cosmic middle finger aimed squarely at them. "Well, isn't this just peachy?" Jex drawled, peering out the viewport at the swirling chaos. "Got ourselves a real beachfront property. Minus the beach. Or the property." Tarek grunted, rummaging through their dwindling supplies with the fervor of a bargain hunter hitting the clearance aisle. "We're running low on everything, including hope. Picking through this desert is like trying to squeeze water from a stone. A very dry, very angry stone." "Oh, great," Harlan muttered from his corner, eyes glued to the alien script like it was the universe's worst crossword puzzle. "Now we just need a miracle and some duct tape. Maybe we can use the latter to hold the former together. Or maybe," Tamsin cut in, crossing her arms as she stared down the odds like they owed her money, "we stop whining and figure out how to access whatever's left of this city." "Right," Jex said, rubbing his hands together with mock enthusiasm. "Because nothing screams, 'good idea,' like trudging into the heart of an angry desert storm." Tamsin ignored the sarcasm, her gaze sweeping over the motley crew with the kind of determination that made lesser beings feel like they should apologize. "Look, the shutdown sequence is buried down there. If we don't find it soon, Earth's going to be the universe's newest sandbox. And I don't know about you, but I'm not a fan of turning our home into a giant litter box." "Always with the optimism," Jex said with a smirk that could cut glass. Tarek shrugged, tossing a can of something unidentifiable into the air and catching it deftly. "If we're going to get buried under a mountain of sand, might as well do it with style." Harlan's voice cut through the banter, filled with a grim focus. "The sublevel where the sequence might be is buried deeper than a bureaucrat's sense of shame. But I've pinpointed a potential entrance. It's risky, sure, but what isn't these days?" "Risky's our middle name," Jex replied, shoving a few supplies into his bag. "Though, personally, I'd prefer wealthy or comfortable." "Focus, people," Tamsin said, pulling their attention back with a sharpness that would make knives blush. "We've got a job to do, and we're damn well going to do it." Outside, the storm raged on, sand slamming against the hull with the fury of a spurned lover. The crew geared up, checking equipment and sharing looks that spoke volumes about their camaraderie and their mutual realization that they might be on a one-way trip to nowhere. As they stepped off the ship, the desert wind hit them like a freight train with a grudge, sand biting at their skin. The visibility was almost nil, just the way Zharak seemed to like it, keeping its secrets hidden beneath layers of grit and time. "Anyone else feel like we're walking through the inside of a hairdryer?" Jex asked, shielding his eyes as best he could. "I'd kill for a hairdryer," Tarek shot back, trudging through the sand with the steady determination of someone who had long since stopped caring about sanity. "Even one with a vendetta." "Less talking, more walking," Tamsin ordered, leading them through the storm with a stubbornness that could outlast mountains. They pressed on, each step a battle against the relentless wind, each breath filled with the taste of despair and desperation. But they were used to that, a bitter, familiar flavor that had etched itself into their bones long before Zharak had entered the picture. Finally, they reached the ruins, a jagged wound in the landscape, remnants of a civilization long forgotten. The entrance Harlan had found was little more than a crack in the earth, barely visible beneath the shifting sands. "Here it is," Harlan announced, voice muffled by the storm. "Our doorway to potential salvation or a very sandy grave." "Well, aren't you just a ray of sunshine?" Jex quipped, peering into the dark abyss with a mix of curiosity and dread. "Let's just get this over with," Tamsin said, dropping down into the opening without hesitation. "Follow me or get left behind." The rest followed, descending into the bowels of the forgotten city with the resignation of those who had long ceased expecting anything but the worst. The air inside was cool, a stark contrast to the inferno above, and filled with the musty scent of history and decay. "Feels like a tomb," Tarek muttered, adjusting his grip on his gear. "All we need now are the ghosts." "If this place has ghosts, I'm charging them rent," Jex replied, flicking on his flashlight and sweeping the beam across the ancient walls. We could use the cache. The corridors twisted and turned, a labyrinth of stone and silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Each step echoed like a heartbeat, a reminder that time was not on their side. Harlan led the way, eyes scanning the walls for any sign of the script he'd been studying, any clue that might lead them to the sublevel, and the shutdown sequence they so desperately needed. They pressed on, deeper and deeper into the city's core, the air growing heavier with each step. Silence enveloped them, broken only by their footsteps and the distant rumble of the storm above, a reminder of the chaos they'd left behind. Finally, Harlan stopped, staring at a section of the wall with a mixture of triumph and disbelief. I think this is it. The entrance to the sublevel. Looks like a crack in the wall to me, Jex said, squinting at the markings. It's more than that, Harlan replied, running his fingers over the ancient symbols. It's a doorway. The sequence is down there. Then what are we waiting for? Tamsin asked, pushing past him to examine the wall. Open it. With careful hands, Harlan worked the mechanism hidden within the stone, each movement precise, as if playing a game of high-stakes chess. After what felt like an eternity, the wall shifted, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. Well, this isn't ominous at all, Tarek murmured, eyeing the passage with skepticism. Let's go, Tamsin said, leading the way once again. We're running out of time. The descent was steep, each step a reminder of the uncertainty that lay ahead. The air grew cooler, the silence thicker, as they ventured deeper into the heart of Xandros. At the bottom, the passage opened into a vast chamber, its walls lined with more of the alien script. In the center stood a console, dusty and untouched, a relic of a time long past. This must be it, Harlan said, approaching the console with the reverence of a pilgrim at a holy site. Let's hope it's more user-friendly than it looks, Jex quipped, joining him. Harlan began to work, his fingers dancing over the controls with a skill born of necessity and desperation. The others watched, tension thick in the air as they waited for something, anything, to happen. For a moment, nothing but silence filled the chamber. Then, the console began to hum, lights flickering to life as if awakening from a long slumber. Is it working? Tarek asked, glancing around as if expecting the walls to collapse at any moment. Give it a minute, Harlan replied, focused on the task at hand. Minutes stretched into an eternity as the console's hum grew louder, reverberating through the chamber like the heartbeat of the city itself. The lights flickered and danced, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Finally, Harlan stepped back, a look of cautious triumph on his face. I think it's ready. The sequence is primed, and now we just hit the big red button and hope for the best? Jex asked, half serious. Something like that, Tamsin replied, eyeing the console with the wariness of someone who knew all too well the risks involved. Then let's do it, Tarek said, stepping forward. Better to go out with a bang than a whimper. With a nod, Harlan activated the sequence, his hands steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. The console responded with a series of beeps and clicks, the lights flaring brighter as the sequence initiated. The chamber shuddered, dust falling from the ceiling as the ancient machinery rumbled to life. The sound echoed through the passageways, a low, ominous growl that seemed to shake the very foundations of the city. Outside, the storm intensified, the winds howling with a fury that matched the chaos within. The sands shifted and roiled, as if the planet itself was rebelling against their intrusion. Hold on to something, Tamsin warned, bracing herself against the nearest wall. The ground trembled beneath them, cracks appearing in the stone as the city groaned in protest. The air was thick with tension, every second stretched taut like a wire on the verge of snapping. But they held on, the crew a stubborn nod of defiance in the face of the storm. They'd come too far, fought too hard to give up now. Whatever happened next, they were ready. Then, with a final, shuddering roar, the sequence completed. The console's lights dimmed, the hum receding into silence as the machinery spun down. For a moment, nothing happened. The storm outside raged on, unrelenting, and the air hung heavy with anticipation. Then, slowly, the winds began to die down, their fury lessening as the shutdown sequence took hold. The sand settled, the storm's wrath dissipating like smoke in the wind. It's working, Harlan said, voice filled with disbelief and relief. Damn right it is, Jex replied, a grin spreading across his face. I knew we'd pull it off. Don't get cocky, Tamsin warned, though there was a hint of a smile in her eyes. Tarek let out a long breath, tension bleeding from his shoulders as he surveyed the chamber. Well, I'll be damned. We might just make it out of this alive. As the storm outside continued to fade, the crew exchanged looks of weary triumph. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd found the sequence and stopped the impending disaster. For now, at least, the universe's biggest train wreck had been averted. And if nothing else, they could take solace in that small, hard-won victory. Let's get out of here, Tamsin said, turning back toward the staircase. We've got a planet to save. With renewed determination, they began the climb back to the surface, the weight of their achievement bolstering them against the challenges that still lay ahead. But for the first time in a long while, they had hope, a stubborn, unyielding hope that refused to be snuffed out, even in the face of the darkest hour. The dusty chamber echoed with the sound of their footsteps as they made their way back up the narrow staircase. Tamsin led the way, her mind racing through the possibilities and pitfalls that awaited them above. The path they'd chosen was about as reassuring as a handshake with a rabid dog, but it was the only one they had. Anyone else feel like we're the universe's worst house guests? Jex asked, breaking the silence as they climbed. Completely wrecked the place, barely touched the minibar. Tarek snorted, adjusting the strap of his pack. Hey, if you can't leave a place worse off than you found it, are you even trying? Behind them, Harlan was still buzzing with the adrenaline of their narrow success. He held the digital equivalent of an ancient treasure map, crammed full of cryptic symbols and half-drawn theories. I guess we're miracle workers now, he said, a touch of awe in his voice. Stopped the storm, saved a planet. Yeah, well, don't order your sainthood just yet, Tamsin replied dryly. We still have to get back to a planet that can't decide if it's a sauna or a swamp. Earth, Jex groaned, as if the word were a particularly foul-tasting curse. I hear it's lovely this time of year, if you like swimming through your own sweat. Could be worse, Tarek chimed in. Could be Zharak. You mean where the sand actively tries to kill you and the air feels like it's plotting your demise? Harlan asked, a smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, real paradise. Tamsin paused, holding up a hand to silence the banter as they reached the surface. The storm had mostly settled, though the sky still churned with the remnants of the chaos they'd unwittingly unleashed. All right. Let's move, she said, adjusting her visor against the grit still swirling in the air. They trudged forward, the ship looming ahead like a battered guardian. It stood amidst the dunes, a testament to every bit of bad luck and poor judgment that had landed them here. Home sweet heap of junk, Jex muttered, patting the hull with a sarcastic affection. Still standing, mostly. Let's see if it flies before you get all sentimental, Tamsin replied, stepping onto the ramp. The others followed, grateful for the respite from the sand's relentless bite. Inside, the ship was as they'd left it, crowded, messy, and smelling faintly of burnt toast and desperation. The control room was a clutter of blinking lights and creaking panels, each promising its own unique brand of misfortune. Harlan, see if you can coax some life back into our systems, Tamsin ordered, sliding into the pilot's seat. Tarek, check the supplies. If we're running low, I'd like to know before we're halfway to Earth. Roger that, Captain Buzzkill, Tarek replied with a mock salute, making his way to the storage compartment with Harlan in tow. Jex sprawled into the co-pilot's seat, his usual air of nonchalance barely masking the tension that thrummed beneath. So, moment of truth. Can we actually leave this sand trap or are we stuck until the end of time? Let's find out, Tamsin said, her fingers dancing over the controls with a familiarity born of necessity. The ship responded with a series of groans and wheezes that might have been encouraging if you were fluent in dying machinery. The engines rumbled to life, their vibrations shaking the walls as they powered up. The sensation was both comforting and alarming, like a particularly vigorous massage from a very angry bear. Jex glanced at the readouts, his expression a mix of relief and wariness. Looks like we're good to go, assuming nothing falls off mid-flight. Let's keep chatter about falling off to a minimum, Tamsin replied, guiding the ship up and away from the sandy expanse below. The horizon stretched out, vast and unforgiving, as they ascended into the sky. Tarek returned, joining them at the cockpit. Supplies are adequate, assuming none of you decide to eat like a starved pack of hyenas. Oh, come on, Jex retorted, grinning. Hyenas are way more dignified than us. As they broke through Zharak's atmosphere, Earth's distant silhouette began to loom on the radar. It was a comforting sight despite its many flaws, like an old friend you've grown tired of but can't quite bring yourself to abandon. All right, Tamsin said, settling into the rhythm of the flight. Let's go home and see what kind of mess we've got waiting for us. Harlan returned to the cockpit, a tablet clutched in his hands. I've been running through the script we found down there. It's not just a shutdown sequence. There's more to this. Tamsin raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite herself. More? Like what? Like a hell of a lot of encrypted data, for starters, Harlan replied, eyes gleaming with the thrill of discovery. It's going to take time to decode, but I think it's all connected to the terraforming network. Jex leaned back, his expression a mix of skepticism and anticipation. Great, more mysteries. Just what we need. Hey, mysteries pay the bills, Tarek pointed out, settling into a seat. Or at least, they would if we bothered sending invoices. Whatever it is, we'll deal with it once we're back on Earth, Tamsin said, glancing at the viewscreen as they cruised toward their beleaguered home. One crisis at a time, remember? The ship hummed beneath them, its trajectory smooth and sure. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was a sense of calm, however fleeting it might be. Anyone else feel like we're due for a break? Jex asked, breaking the silence. Maybe a vacation on a nice, quiet planet where things don't explode every 5 minutes? I hear those are in short supply, Harlan replied, not looking up from his tablet. Besides, Tamsin added, smirking, where's the fun in that? The crew settled into a comfortable rhythm, the banter flowing easily as they made their way through the stars. The tension of Zharak slowly faded, replaced by the familiar camaraderie of shared triumph and numerous near disasters. Hours passed in relative peace, the kind of peace that feels unnatural and suspicious after too long in the chaos. But they took it for what it was, a brief respite in the storm of their lives. As Earth loomed larger on the horizon, stark and bruised but still unmistakably home, Tamsin couldn't help but feel a flicker of pride. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd averted another disaster. All right, people, she called, bringing the ship into the final approach. Let's get ready to land and see what our next set of nightmares looks like. Think they'll throw us a parade? Jex asked, sounding wistful. Or just charge us for the damage? Tarek snorted. If we're lucky, they'll just ignore us. Hey, I'd settle for not getting shot at immediately, Harlan said, shutting down his tablet with a satisfied sigh. Tamsin guided the ship down, the engines whirring as they prepared for landing. Earth's surface was as they remembered it, a patchwork of blue and green marred by the scars of industry and human error. But it was still theirs, for better or worse. The landing was smooth, the ship settling onto the ground with a gentle thud. The crew unbuckled their harnesses, stretching limbs cramped from hours in the cockpit. Well, here we are, Tamsin said, rising from her seat. Let's see what fresh hell awaits. They disembarked, stepping onto the tarmac with a mixture of weariness and anticipation. The air was thick with humidity, each breath a reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. As they made their way toward the facility, a figure emerged to greet them, a tall man with a harried expression and a clipboard that looked like it might double as a weapon. Ah, the heroes of the hour, he said, voice dripping with irony. I hope you're ready to explain the chaos you've left in your wake. Chaos? Us? Never, Jex replied, feigning innocence. Let's skip the courtesy and get to the point, Tamsin said, crossing her arms. What's the damage? The man sighed, flipping through pages of notes. Well, you've managed to stabilize the climate, at least temporarily. But the network's still a mess, and we've got reports of, let me guess, Tarek interrupted, mass hysteria, dogs and cats living together? More or less, the man replied, not missing a beat. So, what do you plan to do about it? Tamsin exchanged a glance with her crew, a silent understanding passing between them. They'd faced down storms and ancient mysteries, solved puzzles and averted disaster. Whatever came next, they'd handle it together. Well, she said, turning back to the man, I guess we'll have to save the world. Again, the man looked skeptical, but there was a hint of grudging respect in his gaze. Good luck with that. As he walked away, Jex nudged Tamsin with his elbow. You know, with all this saving the world business, we might end up famous. Or infamous, Tarek added, grinning. Either way, Harlan said, slipping his tablet back into his bag, it's never boring. They stood together, the sky overhead a swirling tapestry of clouds and light. Earth was still a mess, but it was their mess, and they wouldn't have it any other way. All right, team, Tamsin said, leading them toward the facility. Let's get to work. And as they stepped forward, the universe yawned open with all its chaotic possibilities, daring them to defy it yet again. The door to the facility slid open with a reluctant hiss, like it was already tired of dealing with people. Tamsin let out a low whistle, surveying the cavernous room beyond. A medley of cables snaked across the concrete floor, connected to panels that blinked and glowed like they were auditioning for a disco revival. Well, this looks like fun, Jex quipped, nudging a stray cable with his boot. It sparked indignantly, like a cat swatting away unwanted attention. Welcome to the nerve center of chaos, Tarek said, dropping his pack with a thud. If we're gonna fix this mess, better start here. Harlan was already engrossed in his tablet, eyes darting across lines of alien script that danced like a drunken centipede. I've got the shutdown sequence queued up. It should stabilize the climate network. Should, Tamsin echoed, raising an eyebrow. Not exactly comforting. Hey, I like to keep expectations low. That way, we can all be pleasantly surprised when things don't explode, Harlan replied, fingers tapping away. Or disappointed when they do, Jex added with a grin. Tamsin shot him a look that could sharpen knives. Let's avoid the exploding part, shall we? As they settled into their respective areas, it became clear that this was going to be anything but straightforward. The ancient network was as temperamental as a toddler with a sugar high, every panel a cryptic puzzle that needed solving before they could even think about the shutdown sequence. Tamsin took a deep breath, the kind that tasted of dust and stale air. All right, people, let's figure out which of these panels won't fry us alive if we push the wrong button. Always a reassuring start to any mission, Tarek said dryly, pulling out a toolkit that looked like it had seen better centuries. Jex wandered over to a panel, peering at it as if it might offer him a drink. You know, if this doesn't work out, I've always wanted to start a career in interpretive dance. Tamsin didn't bother to hide her smirk. I think saving the world is more your speed. Less chance of toe injuries. The room was filled with the hum of machinery and the occasional curse as they worked, each of them focused on deciphering their piece of the alien puzzle. Tarek squinted at a particularly stubborn panel, his fingers deftly adjusting wires and dials in a way that suggested he might actually know what he was doing. These ancients had a real flair for overcomplicating things, he muttered. Must have been hell at parties. Harlan glanced up, amused. Yeah, but imagine the light shows. Jex chuckled, tapping a rhythm on the console with his fingers. You think they had alien DJs? Maybe this is all just one big rave gone wrong. With our luck, Tamsin cut in, we're probably just trying to shut off the universe's most elaborate toaster. But despite the banter, tension hung in the air like static electricity, one wrong move away from a thunderstorm. Hours passed in a blur of calculations, translations, and a fair share of trial and error. Mostly error, if they were being honest. Finally, Harlan straightened, a triumphant gleam in his eye. I think I've got it. This should trigger the reset and stabilize the network. Should, Jex repeated, his skepticism as thick as the grime on the facility's walls. All right, let's do this, Tamsin said, gathering the team around the main console like it was a campfire and they were about to tell ghost stories. The sequence initiated with an ominous hum, the room vibrating with the power of machinery waking up after far too long a sleep. Lights flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced across the room like they were mocking their efforts. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched, tense and expectant. Then, with a sound like grinding stones, the machines began to whir into a complex symphony of beeps and clicks. Here we go, Harlan murmured, watching the readouts with a hawk's focus. The room lit up as the sequence progressed, lines of alien script scrolling across screens in a mesmerizing cascade of data. The air crackled with the promise of something momentous, a pivotal moment in the making. Everything okay back there? Tamsin asked, glancing over her shoulder at Tarek and Jex, who were busy keeping the panels from having a tantrum. So far, so good, Tarek replied, not taking his eyes off the panel. No explosions yet, which is nice. Jex flashed a thumbs up. I think we're in the clear. Or, you know, as clear as things get for us. But the sense of relief was short-lived. A deep rumble shook the facility, dust cascading from the ceiling in a fine mist. A warning light blinked angrily on the console, a harbinger of impending doom. What's that?" Jex asked, pointing at the flashing red light like it was a particularly aggressive spider. Harlan frowned, his fingers dancing over the keys. "It looks like the network's trying to reboot, but there's a surge." "It's overloading." "Of course it is," Tamsin said, exasperation lacing her words. "Because nothing can ever just work, can it?" They dove into action, scrambling to stabilize the system before the overload turned their victory into ash. Tamsin felt the sweat trickle down her spine, a steady reminder of the stakes at play. "Tarek, manage the power flow. We need to balance the load or we're toast," Harlan shouted, urgency sharpening his voice. Tarek nodded, his hands a blur as he adjusted settings with a precision that belied his usual laid-back demeanor. "On it, but I swear, if I see one more blinking light today." Jex was already at the secondary console, rerouting power like it was something he'd done 1,000 times, which, given their luck, he probably had. "We're almost there, just need a little more time." Tamsin's heart pounded as she watched the meters fluctuate, each dip and rise a potential disaster. But slowly, inch by inch, the indicators began to stabilize, the red lights fading into a more reassuring green. "Got it," Harlan exclaimed, relief evident in the slight drop of his shoulders. Networks back online and stable. The room seemed to exhale with them, the tension dissipating like steam. Tamsin let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, her pulse slowly returning to normal. "Did we actually do it?" Jex asked, almost disbelieving. Tarek grinned, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "Unless this is all one big hallucination, yeah, I think we did." Tamsin allowed herself a rare smile. "Looks like our little toaster reset worked." The team took a moment to savor their victory, the weight of their success settling in. But as always, reality was quick to intrude. "Incoming message," Harlan said, tapping at his tablet. "Looks like HQ wants a report on what just happened." "Ah, great," Jex said, rolling his eyes. Back to the bureaucratic grind. Tamsin sighed, the prospect of dealing with command as appealing as a root canal. "Let's get it over with. The sooner we report, the sooner we can do whatever it is we do when we're not saving the world." The communication screen flickered to life, revealing the stern face of their contact at HQ. A woman with the kind of expression that could sour milk. "Captain Tamsin Core, status report," she said, skipping pleasantries entirely. "Network's stable, Earth's still spinning, and we're all in one piece," Tamsin replied, giving the bare minimum of what she could pass off as a report. "Excellent. However, there are consequences." "The reset triggered a few unexpected events," the woman said, her tone as flat as a lifeless star. Tarek groaned, rubbing his temples. "Here we go. What kind of consequences?" Tamsin asked, already bracing for the worst. "Minor geographical shifts, some technological disruptions. The usual side effects of playing with ancient alien tech," the woman replied, as if listing items on a grocery receipt. "Minor," Jex echoed, incredulous. "That's a word for it. We'll handle the fallout," Tamsin assured her, the weariness settling into her bones. "Just add it to our tab." The woman nodded, her face slipping into a more neutral expression. "Be ready for further instructions." HQ out. The screen went dark, leaving them in the ambient hum of the facility. "Well, that was cheerful," Harlan said, tucking his tablet away. Tarek stretched, his joints popping in protest. "Could have gone worse. I didn't even lose an eyebrow this time." "Let's not make that a new standard for success," Tamsin replied, though her words were softened by a hint of amusement. Jex patted her on the back. "You know, I think we deserve a drink. Or several." Tamsin chuckled, leading the way out of the facility. The air outside was heavy with the promise of rain, a fitting backdrop to their return. "You read my mind." As they walked, a sense of accomplishment mingled with the familiar anticipation of whatever mess would come next. They'd faced the chaos and come out on the other side, battered but unbroken. "Hey, think we'll get medals for this?" Jex asked, half joking. "Knowing us," Tarek said, "we'll probably just get a bill." Their laughter echoed in the open air, a sound that carried with it the weight of their triumphs and the knowledge that tomorrow would bring its own set of challenges. But for now, they took solace in the fact that they'd done the impossible. Again. And in the world of chaos and uncertainty, that was worth more than any medal. Onward, Tamsin said, forging ahead with her team. To the next disaster. And with that, they set off, unafraid, unyielding, and impossibly, irreversibly human. The corridors of the ancient facility buried beneath Zharak's sandstorm-washed surface were now silent, an eerie calm that followed the storm of their previous endeavors. It was the kind of silence that only existed when you knew it wouldn't last long. Tamsin led the way, her boots echoing against the metallic floor as they made their way back to the ship, a chugging old relic they fondly referred to as the scrap heap. "Do you think the ship's still in one piece, or are we walking back to Earth?" Jex asked, shooting a sideways glance at Tarek, whose toolkit clanked with each step. Tarek shrugged. "Considering it's held together by little more than alien duct tape and our collective willpower, I'd say flip a coin." "Great," Jex sighed, "and here I thought we'd be getting hazard pay for this gig." "Please," Tamsin said, rolling her eyes. "If HQ hasn't paid us for saving Earth from annihilation, they're definitely not bankrolling our impromptu sand vacation." They reached the ship, its once shiny exterior now marred by Zharak's abrasive winds, making it look like a badger with mange. The ramp lowered with a grating screech, more nails on a chalkboard than a welcoming gesture. "Home sweet home," Harlan remarked, pausing to brush some of the sand from his coat. "You think the universe would cut us a break just once?" "Optimism, Harlan?" Tamsin mocked, giving him a pat on the back. "Didn't know you had it in you." He smirked as they filed into the ship. Just keeping things interesting. Inside, the ship was as they left it, cramped, cluttered, and reeking of burnt coffee and stale air. Tamsin settled into the pilot seat, her fingers dancing over the controls like an old pianist with a slightly out-of-tune piano. "Ready to see if this bucket can still fly?" she asked, mostly to herself. Jex plopped down in the co-pilot seat, grinning. "If it doesn't, at least we'll have a nice view on the way down." With a rumble that was more cough than roar, the ship's engines sputtered to life, and they lifted off the ground, leaving Zharak and its buried secrets behind. "Not a bad getaway," Tarek said, leaning against the bulkhead. "Could have done without the near-death experience, though." "Adds character," Jex retorted. "We'd be boring without a few scars." "Speak for yourself," Tamsin muttered, adjusting their heading towards Earth. "I've got enough character to last a lifetime." The journey back to Earth was uneventful, at least in their world. Harlan was nose-deep in his tablet, likely trying to avoid thinking about what awaited them. Earth, the giant mess it was, seemed to have stabilized, but stable was a relative term. Like saying your house is only mostly on fire. "So, what do we do when we get back?" Jex asked, reclining as best he could in his chair. "Report to HQ, take a number. Wait our turn to get chewed out," Tamsin replied. "The usual heroes welcome. And then?" Jex pressed, ever the optimist. "We keep looking," Harlan said, finally lifting his eyes from the tablet. "There are other networks, other systems that could go haywire." "Sounds like a job for someone who doesn't want to live to see next year," Tarek said dryly. "So, Tamsin concluded. "Because, let's face it, who else would take the job?" "Somebody with a death wish," Jex said. "Or too much time on their hands," Harlan added. "Or both," Tarek finished, smirking. The ship's autopilot hummed along, the systems rattling in a comforting kind of way, if you could call it that. It was like listening to an old friend's familiar complaints. The kind you knew by heart but still managed to make you smile. As they approached Earth's orbit, the sight was both familiar and disconcerting. A swirling mass of clouds and land, marred by the visible scars of human ingenuity, or perhaps idiocy. The reset had done its work, but Earth's climate was still a petulant child, prone to tantrums at the slightest provocation. "Back to the swamp sauna," Jex said, peering out at the view. "Home sweet home. Or hell on Earth," Tarek added, leaning back and closing his eyes. "Depends on the day," Tamsin said. They broke through the atmosphere, the ship rattling like a tin can in a hurricane. It held, of course, because despite appearances, the scrap heap was as resilient as they were. Once they landed, the scent of Earth hit them like a nostalgic punch to the face. Humid air, the kind that clung to your skin like an unwelcome relative, greeted them as they disembarked. HQ was waiting, of course. A nondescript building amidst the chaos, its walls stained with the grime of endless bureaucracy. Captain Core, their contact, greeted, her expression as warm as ever, which was to say, not at all. Your report? Network stable, Earth saved, minor hiccups, Tamsin rattled off, not bothering to sugarcoat. The woman nodded, her eyes flicking to each of them. Good work, though next time, try to avoid minor hiccups. We'll try our best, Tamsin replied dryly. They were dismissed, sent off with a wave as if they hadn't just pulled off the impossible. Again. Well, that was fun, Jex said, stretching as they walked away. If by fun you mean soul-crushing and headache-inducing, then yes, Harlan replied. You know, we should really write a book about our adventures, Tarek suggested, adjusting his toolkit. Call it, How Not to Die, The Idiot's Guide to Surviving Space. Jex laughed. Only problem is, the people who'd need it are usually already dead. Point, Tarek conceded. As they wandered back to their makeshift quarters, another relic of a bygone era, they found themselves reflecting on what had been and what would come. Do you ever think about what it would be like to not do this? Jex asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Do what? Save planets? Dodge death? Drink terrible coffee? Tamsin asked. All of it, Jex said, a hint of seriousness creeping into his voice. Tamsin paused, considering. Sometimes. But then I remember that someone has to do it. And who better than us? You make it sound noble, Harlan said, smirking. Noble, stupid, Tamsin shrugged. Same difference. Well, at least it's not boring, Tarek said, dropping onto his bunk with a groan. I'll drink to that, Jex replied, raising an imaginary glass. They settled into their routine, aware that their moment of respite was temporary. The universe was vast, full of ancient systems and lurking dangers. And, like moths to a flame, or idiots to trouble, they'd keep seeking them out. Do you think they'll ever fix it? Harlan asked, glancing out at the chaotic skyline. Fix what? Jex asked, following his gaze. All of it. The networks, the climate, the mess we've made, Harlan said. Probably not, Tamsin replied, leaning against the wall. But we'll keep trying. Because what else is there to do? Sounds about right, Jex said, settling in with a sigh. The air was thick with the scent of rain, a promise of cleansing that never quite materialized. But it was home, in all its gritty, imperfect glory. To tomorrow, Tamsin said, raising her hand. May it be slightly less disastrous than today, Tarek added, raising his hand as well. And slightly more lucrative, Jex chimed in. They laughed, a sound that carried into the night, a testament to their resilience, their stubbornness, and their refusal to give in to the chaos around them. The universe was a mess, and they were the fools trying to clean it up. But for now, in this moment, that was enough. Because in a world full of uncertainty and disorder, it was the small victories that mattered. And as they sat there, the weight of the world on their shoulders and the future uncertain, they knew one thing for sure. They'd face it together, come hell or high water. In the end, that was all that mattered. With a final shared glance, they settled into the night, the promise of new adventures lingering on the horizon. A horizon they'd meet head-on, with sarcasm, stubbornness, and an unshakable resolve. Because that's who they were. The last line of defense, the unlikely heroes, and the best damn crew the universe never asked for.